Even started. So everybody welcome in. We are in my McMinnville living room studio now. Andy, welcome into the new digs.
This is so much better than being back in the corner when I would scream and nobody would hear me.
It was a thing. I know. You poor abused soul.
I feel safer up front here in the windows.
Do you? Oh, yeah. Well, good. Well, and we brought Andrew this time too. So
he's my bodyguard.
We have like the battle of the Andys today. We got Andy Lytle and we got Andrew Davis, and so we're here to talk about so many things that are sparkling wine. So, you are old hat. You get the trophy for being on the podcast.
You can't call me old.
I can totally call you old.
I am old though.
Yes, you are older than me, so therefore you are old.
That's true.
Yes, I don't think by much.
Well,
but a couple of years.
Andrew just turned 50 last week.
See, so I'm older than Andrew.
And Andy's older than me.
Yeah, see, there we go. Yeah, so you are the old man in the group. I'm so sorry, my friend.
I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's a badge of honor.
Yes, but you do get the trophy for being on the podcast the most times. The first time was a shit can time because we recorded and the audio got destroyed.
And you made me drink.
And I made you drink. But we did talk about peanut butter cookies. That was a Wynn Peterson specialty. She brought in peanut butter cookies that day.
Yeah.
That started our kind of like guilty pleasures series on what to pair with junk food, basically. And then you were my co-host with Harry and Wynn with the father-daughter show. And now we're talking about sparkling with Andrew. So this is kind of like full circle. Pretty soon you're just going to host this thing and I'm going to be fired and out of here. So.
At some point you might just interview me, but up until now it seems like
you were dangerous by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I think that's true.
It's a good idea. So we're going to give Andrew like a benefit of the doubt and he can listen to your professionalism on your story and how you're going to tell it. And then we're going to move over to Andrew and talk to him for a little bit.
But you do realize we've been making wine together 13 years.
Yes.
Professionalism isn't one of the highest criteria.
You are not
in
professionalism with me either. So.
I mean, fun's number one.
Yes, I totally agree.
And then fun's number two.
Yep.
Three's fun.
Okay.
Wine. And then wine's four.
Okay. Yeah, well, that's not a bad combo.
No.
I need to like invoke that in my office where insurance comes last. Mm-hmm. And then we do all the fun stuff first, but we wouldn't get anything done.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'd have pissed off people, so, there's that. So
insurance makes people angry anyway. You calm them down about it.
It does. Yes. We tell people to calm down regularly.
Yes.
We try really hard to keep people
happy.
You
never have to tell me that.
You're not my client, so it's okay.
I think that's code for I need to be your client.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that.
Oh.
We can still be friends.
Your fees are too high.
Oh, bullshit! You've never looked. So, okay, Andy Lytle, Mr. Full of Shit up to your eyeballs. Let's do a debriefing on your story and how this whole wine thing happened, because all these people have heard this before. So let's make it entertaining.
The problem with this story now is I can't embellish too much because I have Andrew with me, who's virtually been with me along the full ride.
You got an in-person fact checker.
I do. I have a fact checker right next to me. Now, I can talk about a few things that happened before, and, the concept of, Lytle-Barnett and how Antin and I, had a conversation. This is back in 2011, about, we need to start making high-end sparkling wine here in the Valley. And, Peter Fierra's his maker. They're in the different hemisphere down in South Africa. And I just kept suggesting, Pinot Noir has always been here. Chardonnay has really come into its own since like 2008 or 9. And as a result of that, we really need to make sparkling wine here. And I was really trying to convince Anthony to do that on his own. And after about 6 months, he called me. He goes, "You really think I should do sparkling wine here in Oregon?" And I said, "I think you're crazy if you don't." And he goes, "Okay, I'm going to do it." I said, "Good for you." He goes, "But you're going to partner with me 50-50. And so that's how Lytle-Barnett, Barnett is his mother's maiden name, and that's how Lytle-Barnett got started. The funny part was, he's like, "Well, who's going to make our wine?" I'm like, "I have no idea." And so I went to lunch with Jessica Ensworth, and we had a lunch, and I said, "Who's the best sparkling maker in Oregon?" And she goes, "Hands down, Andrew Davis." So I immediately kind of started researching him. He and I got together and had a conversation. The window was a blessing because He had just left Argyle. He was just starting Radiant, and it was right in between the two. And if I would have asked him 2 weeks later, he would have told me no, because Radiant took off like a rocket. And I found him in a window where I said, "Will you be our maker?" And he agreed to it. And the funny part about that conversation, and I'm sure Andrew will talk about this, but the fact that he goes, "Well, where are we getting our grapes?" And I said, "Well, I thought you'd tell me where we're getting our grapes." And he started laughing, and then he goes, "Where are we making the wine?" And I said, "Oh, I thought you'd tell me where we're making the wine." So he just started laughing at me, not with me. And
easy to do.
Huh?
Easy
to do. Yeah.
Yep.
And quite frankly, that's how our relationship started. That was at the
You missed one key point there.
Oh, what is it?
I said, well, fine, we've got a full year to dream up where we're going to get this fruit and where we're going to make this wine. Mm-hmm. Because it was July, August at this point.
Oh, it was June. I think it was June.
And Andy, no, it was later than that.
It was pretty late.
Andy said, no, we're doing it this year.
Yeah.
In August.
I'm impatient.
Shocking.
Yeah. And he just started laughing. He literally was laughing at me in the restaurant. And so I thought that, kind of made me feel bad, but I got over it. But the reality was, is we went out, and we found some unbelievable fruit that had just become available, but it hadn't been farmed, to be sparkling. It was farmed to be still. And yet at the same time, we could still harvest it when we wanted to and get it with the acid and the bricks the way that we wanted them to be and the pH. But, it wasn't farmed as sparkling. So we weren't even really sure that the first vintage in 2013 was going to be Lytle-Barnett. We just didn't know. And ironically, when we started doing some of the testing on that, we just fell in love with it. It was just fantastic. And when you taste it today, we just giggle over the fact that we only made Brut Rosé and we made Blanc de Noir that year. And we really didn't find Chardonnay that we liked. We only found Pinot Noir that was available to us and that was of the quality that we really wanted. We found that on the Rose Rock Vineyard. Mm-hmm. And then ironically, we harvested that on September 11th, 2013. And on September 12th, 2013, there was a deluge of rain that just hit us for like 5 days, just massive. And then like 3 days later, the Rose Rock Vineyard was sold to the Drouin family. So it was like the timing of all of that was, serendipitous and fantastic. So, yeah, that's how we kind of, how did you get into the, vintage method champenois sparkling wine business?
Especially coming from a beer guy.
Yeah, well, interesting, kind of. So I think you're referring to the fact that family was beer and wine distribution. Yep. Mm-hmm. The reality is that, my first job out of college was with Gallo. So I was a wine guy first, and then I went to work for Coors Brewing Company, and then went back to my family business 8.5 years later, and ran the sales function of that organization until we merged it and sold it. And the reality was, I was always infatuated with the wine business. And then in 2011, I went to work for the Jackson family. And when I went to work with the Jackson family, they were really adamant about educating people about the vineyards. And I fell in love with the vineyards. And a quick backstory, our family's originally timber. And so my grandfather put Doug fir in the ground. And, the idea of me working with the soil and with nature, just really, I had an affinity for that. And it just felt good. And the reality was, we put vines in the ground. So there's something full circle about what we're doing coming back to farming. And, I think most people would tell you here in the Willamette Valley, this community of people that we work with, that we make wine with, that we interact with every single day is absolutely fantastic. It's absolutely a rising tide raises all boats type of scenario, from farming techniques to equipment borrowing to idea sharing to all of those things. And I don't think a lot of the wine regions in the world really do that anymore. And I think we're special in that way. And I give credit to all of our, forefathers who came before us, that kind of started doing this in the 60s and 70s. They put all that in place, right? And so, it's just been an absolute blessing, to kind of come through that. But, as a result of it, I'm a beer guy, non-alcohol wine guy, but my passion was always wine. And my first passion was always bubbles. And, Andrew and I talk about this quite often, but, my absolute favorite wine, Tattinger has a wine called Comte de Champagne, and it's Blanc de Blanc. And there was something about that wine that just in my mouth, it was just fantastic. And so when Andrew and I first started talking about, styles and what we were looking to do, that's really what kept coming back to me. And there was a term that I really couldn't put into words, but it was a feeling that I got kind of on my tongue when I would taste that Tattinger Comte de Champagne Blanc de Blanc. And all these years later, the term has come to me now, and the term is tension. And it's a tension that we create, and that's a combination of acid and winemaking process, but we can do that now. And so it's I don't have a favorite in any of our wines that we make, but the Blanc de Blanc is something that reminds me of how and why we got into the process together.
Those were new things that you shared. Other than there was a few things that maybe a little repeat, but that was like deep and like poetic and sensitive.
I'm very deep. Yeah, I'm a very deep person.
And
when people hear that, they usually don't believe me, and that's probably also true.
And there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a serious bone in your body for the most part.
Well,
I guess unless you're talking about
there are serious bones in my body, especially when Andrew's making me, do Vinclairs, like all day and ripping the enamel off my teeth. I get very serious when it comes to that. But I do tell him all the time, when we get together and we're doing dosage trials or we're doing blending trials or some of those things, I literally feel like a little kid at Christmas. I can't sleep the night before. I'm all excited about it, and it's old hat for him, and he's been doing it forever. But, we've been doing it now, coming on our 13th vintage, and it's still just fantastic and fun. And, I think at the end of the day, I always make this comment, I retired in 2019, and the reality is I've never worked so hard in my life since 2019, but I'm having a blast and having so much fun. And working with people like Andrew and Isabel, it just makes it fun. And our assistant makers and our team, and now we've got our tasting rooms, and we have our our team's growing, and it's a learning curve every single day. Always be learning. And I got a buddy, Richard Tate. He always said, "Live life with intention, impact, and joy." And I just think I'm applying that to the wine side of the business, and in doing so, I'm having fun.
I think that's what life should be about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you can be serious and you can have a serious job or relationships or whatever, but if you're not having fun, you're doing something wrong.
100%.
Yeah. Yep. I get it. So, okay. Anything more you want to add before I switch over to your counterpart?
Well, I want to hear what he has to say. I'm sitting right here.
I cannot wait
I am
until
sitting
he
right here, so he
spills the tea on Andy
Lytle.
I
know.
Yes. Okay.
No,
nothing.
Unless that was just kind of the backstory on Lytle-Barnett and kind of how we got in the business. Hey, there's one thing I will share, which is super cool about, we planted our Anahata vineyard in 2015, and it was fun to be able to do that with Andrew. And ironically, and I didn't know this when Andrew and I met, he's married to Isabelle Meunier, and I didn't know that. And when we were planting the vineyard in 2015, she was with us too, and so she had a say in clones and rootstocks and aspects and all of those different things, as Andrew did. And we always knew that we were going to do a still wine together. We just didn't know when, and when that vineyard was going to be ready to do that. So it was cool to look back a little bit on if you just could look back in the pages and be like, I was pinching myself. I'm walking through, a piece of land that we bought, planting it as a vineyard in 2015 with, the best sparkling maker, in Oregon for sure, and I would arguably for sure say in the world, and also from a still wine perspective, his wife, put Evening Land on the map with her 2007 and 2008 Chardonnays, created the style in everything that we did. So, yeah, I mean, probably a lot of my attitude and my kind of flippant, fun attitude towards it is because I have the best winemaking team in the world.
You have the dream team.
I have the dream team. There's no doubt about it. And I'm going to say this before he jumps on, because I don't want to interrupt him. But
You will.
when it comes to sparkling wine and when it comes to traditional method here in Oregon, Andrew did that. Yes, Roland Stolz was here. Yes, Roland Stolz in '87 made an unbelievable bottle of wine and continues to do that. And he was the first person to do that. Andrew worked for Roland, and he started making sparkling wine. But when Andrew started the Radiant Sparkling Company, it allowed so many of us vineyard growers, suppliers, the opportunity to make sparkling wine. And it was never accessible to us before because it was so expensive and it was out of reach, and we just couldn't do it. And unless he created the Radiant Sparkling Company, there would be no chance that Lytle-Barnett would be what it is today. That there are now 92 producers of traditional method sparkling wine in Oregon, and it's just fantastic. So, I'm honored. That first and foremost, he's my friend, but he's the best winemaker out there.
Those are big shoes. Those are big words.
Those are really big words.
Has he ever talked that nice to you?
He always does.
Yes, I know. He's wonderful. I love him. Yes.
You're not going to get any dirt on him because he's an open book. He'll tell you everything.
He will tell you every bad, dirty thing that he's done. I know.
That's a good point.
Every once in a while, he'll text me randomly with something. I'm like, where the fuck did this come from? Why are you texting me this?
I always tell my kids, don't lie. It's too much hard work to kind of
it
try
is.
to hide
You have to
behind the
remember
lie.
what you did.
Yeah, just wear it
spell
on your sleeve.
Just
That's why I
spell
wear a
it.
black T-shirt and jeans, because it's like I can't hide anything.
No.
No.
This is his Simon Cowell look.
It's not. This is my Portland tuxedo.
Oh.
All I have to do is throw on a sport coat, and I can go anywhere in the world. But
That's kind of what I did earlier. Yep.
See?
Yep.
But if I have my black T-shirt and a pair of jeans, the funny part is, when I show up at the winery, or if we're doing dosage trials or something, and I walk in and I don't have a black T-shirt and a pair of jeans on, Andrew looks at me and goes, "What's wrong?"
No.
Like there's some kind of mood
your
shift.
uniform.
Yeah, exactly.
Your uniform's off.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I met Andrew, and I don't know if you even remember this because I'm probably sure you don't, but I went through the Linfield immersion program. I was the last group that went through. There was 4 of us, and we spent a day at Radiant Sparkling with you. Oh. And you pulled out some sparkling out of like the vaults that had been like lost. It was like Mary Lewis something rather.
Domaine Meriwether?
I think so.
Oh my God, there's a backstory.
Yeah.
It all comes together.
Yeah. So he shared that with us, and I'm just like, it was like I had never tasted sparkling wine like that because it was old.
It was old.
It was old, and it was like almost like a brown color, and like was nutty, and like I'm like, what the fuck is this? I think I actually ended up taking the bottle home because maybe I was the only one of age. No, Jonathan was there. He was old. He was old enough, but I ended up taking it home, and it was amazing. Like such an interesting wine.
Can we tell you a quick story?
Yes, please. Yes. Yeah, because obviously that made a stamp on where I'm at now
And that was a part of Oregon history. That was, aside from Argyle, that was the big producer. And he did everything right. Dr. Jack Baghdad had a vision of sparkling in the valley, and he followed it through. He picked great vineyards. He brought over a Champenoise winemaker to make it. The wines were excellent. He made a 98, he made a 99, he made a 2000. The one thing he didn't do is plan how to sell it. So he had 3 vintages behind him, and for some reason, in the year 2000, nobody wanted bubbles.
He was ahead of his time.
He was ahead of his time, and so he just couldn't sell it. He lost his shirt.
But Domaine Meriwether was consumed in the White House.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look at me drinking fancy wine.
Yes, you were drinking fancy wine. So what's crazy, so Jack Baghdad, Andrew said, "Hey, I have an idea." Because Lytle-Barnett is vintage only. And, we really had no plans to make a non-vintage. And Andrew introduced me to Jack. And Jack and I had some conversations, thanks to Andrew introducing us. And I bought all the intellectual property of Domaine Meriwether. And we've owned it since 2014 or 2015. And it will be the little brother to Lytle-Barnett. And it's going to be our non-vintage, and it'll be called Domaine Meriwether because we bought all the intellectual capital.
Look at me bringing this full circle. You had no idea about this either.
Yeah. And what's crazy is everything from the label, the front label is actually a rug that Sacagawea gave Meriwether Lewis on the expedition. It's the outline of the front label. The back necker is the coin that Thomas Jefferson commissioned for the Lewis and Clark expedition. They had to get the rights from the White House to use that picture of the coin on the back label. So we bought all of that, and we're going to bring that back in Domaine Meriwether. And then to boot, on the very back of the label, when Meriwether Lewis saw the Pacific Ocean for the very first time, he said, "Oh, the joy." And it's quoted on the back of the label. And so we own that quote now. And because of At the Joy and all the things we do with joy, it just was meant to be.
So many little circles and all this serendipity going on all over the place. See, I've learned something new. Yeah, and I had no idea there was that connection. And
Andrew and I are givers. We give information. Yeah.
You give him a compliment, and he completely kicks it through the door and adds his own layer of crap on top. I love you.
Back to Andrew.
Okay, Andrew. Now that I have taken us backwards, and actually we learned something really cool and new. Where did your journey with wine start? Was this part of your upbringing?
Oh, absolutely not. There was a box of Chablis in the fridge. That was my exposure. But I enjoyed wine as I got a little older. I enjoyed wine. I enjoyed the exploration of wine. And thankfully, as a 19-year-old, there was a nice couple that owned a wine shop next to where I was working that would always let me come by and taste.
Oh,
and they would sell me.
And where was this at?
This was in Eugene. They would kindly say that they'd sell me bottles as long as I stayed home with them.
Can't do that anymore.
No, you absolutely can't do that.
Yes. Very frowned upon.
No, very frowned upon. But it was my exposure, and it got me excited about wine. And on a random trip to New Zealand, I ended up working on an island, and as I was there, started to work with one of the farmers who needed the bird netting pulled for his vineyard, and another farmer who needed help bottling, and another farmer who needed help building his winery. And pretty soon I'd worked with all these growers, wine producers, and none of them were making any money, but they were really happy. And I was like, man, maybe I should be doing this. So then I sold wine for a little while, and it didn't feel right. I wanted to get dirt underneath my fingers. So I eventually went back to school and got a master's in winemaking, where I focused on bubbles, because...
Why not?
Well, have you ever seen anybody drinking bubbles that isn't smiling?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, so where did you go to school then?
Lincoln University, outside of Christchurch, New Zealand.
Oh, okay. Wasn't expecting that.
We have wonderful schools in the U.S., but the big ones, UC Davis, are suited to the wines that are in that region. So if they're making bubbles, they're trying to control the acidity, they're trying to elevate the acidity, they're trying to decelerate ripeness. Well, that's not our problem in Oregon, and I knew I'd be coming back to Oregon. We have the opposite problem, so I wanted somewhere that was already looking into the differences of growing cool climate grapes, so that's why I went to New Zealand, because they are cool climate.
I mean, that's a lot of forward thinking, which is probably not a normal thing for a kid that age to go, oh, well,
Wasn't actually that age.
How old were you?
Old enough.
But still, I mean,
I dropped out of school 5 times before I got there.
Yeah, we don't have to talk about that. Yeah, those are small details. But still, I mean, I think there's a lot of forward thinking in that, because I mean, I don't know what year was this? Was this
2002.
Okay, so still fairly new. I mean, young in the Oregon wine history, and definitely in the bubbles as far as what was happening in Oregon. I mean, that wasn't really much of an industry at that point.
No.
Yeah.
And there's reasons for that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay, continue.
So then came back here, and to your point, there's really only one game in town. I wanted to make bubbles on a professional level, so I walked into Argyle. And the winemaker at the time was an Australian named Willie Lunn, and he had gotten there literally 2 weeks before I did. And he I showed up and I had just come off of school. I had all these school loans, so I showed up in a nice shirt, nice slacks, nice pair of shoes, because I didn't want to go in. I wanted to come in a little bit higher than cellar grunt into the cellar, and because I needed to pay off some loans. And Willie's comment to me was, all right, there's 100 barrels out there. If you clean them right now, the job's yours. So I walked out onto the crush pad in the sun in June and ruined a pair of pants, ruined a pair of shoes, ruined a shirt, and I stayed there at Argyle for an entire decade.
Well,
taking
sometimes
his place when he went back to Australia, I took over the winemaking and had Roland Souls, who started Argyle, as my mentor for many years there. Dear friend, taught me a lot.
Yeah, I mean, those are big shoes. I mean, Argyle was the only name that I knew. Like, I mean, I've lived in McMinnville since like 92. And I remember going to Argyle when I didn't know anything, still didn't know anything about wine, but really didn't know anything about wine at that point in time. And remember seeing like the menu from the White House, you know, where they served Argyle wine at the White House, like Clinton's inauguration, maybe something like that. I'm like, whoa, this is legit shit here.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's legit. And that was kind of the first like light bulb that ever went off for me. And then obviously kind of life went by and I forgot about it. But I'm like, wow, okay, I get it. Maybe I get it a little bit. And then it's really grown into this thing. Like, you know, so when you were at Argyle, you were there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Why Radiant Sparkling? Was that the next step?
There was a bit of a leap there.
Okay.
I worked there and kind of said, okay, when Argyle gets to a certain size, it's probably time for me to leave, take on something a little bit smaller, a little bit more personal. So I probably stayed a year or two beyond that point where I said I should, but I jumped out. And during my time there, I had a number of the local winemakers who I got to know say, hey, can you help us? We'd love to make a little bit of sparkling, just a little bit. And I always had to say no because there wasn't enough time in the day. We didn't have enough production space, blah, 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 blah. But I knew that there was sort of a latent desire there to have more sparkling in the valley. And it makes sense. Mm-hmm. We're already growing Pinot. We're already growing Chard. These are the varietals of Champagne. Why not have more?
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, as I leave, I'm probably just going to consult with a few people and help them make sparkling. And as I started to look into that, people said, yeah. But then there was a block. Mm. They didn't have some of the technical knowledge. They also didn't have the expensive machinery. Mm. And that was it. Unless you're making thousands of cases, the bean counters will never let you into the sparkling game. It's just too expensive.
Yeah, I remember you saying that when we were with you that day, talking about like the cost of the machinery and just like the cost of like the actual bottling machine with like the, you know, all of that. I don't even know if you gave us a figure, but you said it was big.
It's big.
And I'm just like, holy shit, okay. Like, I cannot even imagine trying to invest in this, let alone the riddling machines and all the other things that you had going on in there. It was just like,
So I begged, borrowed, and stole to get me into the game. And I started small. I started with really simple machines. And the beauty of sparkling is as I was talking to those first early clients, Andy being one of them, I saw how much they were making. And I knew that they wouldn't be disgorging that for 2 to 3 years. So I always had this runway. And I say, as I take on new clients, I know how much I'm going to have to do in 2 or 3 years. So I could start planning and start getting ready for that moment 2 or 3 years out. And that was the start of Radiant Sparkling.
And it's kind of blown up.
It did.
Yeah. I mean, in my short time that I've been, that was the beginning of my wine journey when I was with you. Like that was like the very beginning because I knew nothing about nothing. I was a beer girl. But I needed to learn about wine. Huh?
From Tillamook.
From Tillamook. Yes, cheese girl, dairy girl. Yeah. But I needed to learn about wine. So that's why I went back to Linfield so I could do my day job better, for that. And so it just, at that point in time, like I was still learning and I didn't know nothing about nothing. And so like, I felt like rosé was kind of on the rise at that point in time. And that was like a new trend. And I'm like, okay. And then I started seeing the bubbles and hearing like scuttle about it. And I'm like, okay, so maybe this is like the new trend or the new thing or whatever. And then all of a sudden it's a thing. Like everybody's doing, And we've had conversations about method champenois versus, carbon infused versus pet nats and whatever else. I've learned a ton over the last years because I talk to people like Andy, and learn from people like you and try to listen and retain. But it's such a movement now that people are taking it seriously, and it doesn't have to come from champagne to be world class.
It's not a movement.
Yeah.
People just like bubbles. Every wine region in the world makes a little bit, somewhere around the periphery. Some of them make more, some of them make less, but everyone's making a little bit. And the question is, how big will it get? The case for Oregon, I think it could be every bit as big as Pinot. There's no reason it shouldn't be.
That's crazy.
And I know I've said it before, but for the old world regions, there seems to be a new world icon region to match. In the case of Bordeaux, you think Napa. Same grapes, stylistically different, but same grapes. Burgundy, probably Oregon. Same icon level of quality, stylistically a little different, but same quality level. No one's done that to Champagne. Sure, they make a ton of bubbles in California, but most of those are at about the $25 price point. They aren't icon level. I think we can do that here.
That's a good segue into why you guys are kind of technically here. Is this where we shift gears a little bit?
Sure.
And talk about the method Oregon and what's going on with that, because I think that's a really great starting point with where we're going from here.
Yeah, I think I think it's super important that we look at sparkling wine category. I'm going to use this as an example. Andrew made a great point. Champagne was doing it. South Africa dealt with this back 30 years ago. And the sparkling wine category had this big umbrella. Underneath it is traditional method. It's pet nat. It's carbon fused. It's non-vintage, poorly, right? A few months, just to try to get some bubbles in it, big bubbles.
More like soda bubbles.
We're all underneath that umbrella called sparkling wine. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't till, I still like to say, and, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn here, when we started doing Lytle-Barnett vintage-only wines in 2013, nobody was doing vintage-only stuff at that time. Soder was doing some things. Argyle had done some things with some extended tirage, but really nobody was focused specifically on sparkling wine, traditional method, vintage-only from Oregon. And that's what we did. We called it, we said, French tradition meets Oregon authenticity was kind of our tagline, even back then. Because we were creating something. We weren't trying to be Champagne. We were being Oregon sparkling. And in that time, in the last 13 years, there has been this, underneath this umbrella, this, huge surge of bubbles of sparkling wine. And, a consumer looks at a carbon fused wine at $16 or $20 and then looks at our wine at $75 or $85 and says, I don't understand, why is there a price difference? And so being underneath the umbrella of just sparkling wine is confusing to the consumer because it's so broad. And, Champagne did a great job of this years ago, really kind of setting the standards of what Champagne can be. South Africa did this 30 years ago with Cap Classique. They introduced the terminology Cap Classique, which was, they were in the exact same boat. Sparkling wine was getting bigger. People were really doing some high-end traditional method. Sparkling wine had to be 6 atmospheres of pressure, had to be aged at least 15 months. All of these different kinds, for non-vintage, had to be aged 3 years for vintage. All of these standards were kind of put in place. And it's really behooved them. It's done very well to have Cap Classique in South Africa. We're there in Oregon. And, thanks to Andrew and Radiant and Vinovate and some of the things that they're doing and the excitement behind it, I think we are at that funny stage. Andrew was just talking about it where, can we be the next Champagne? Of course we can. We really have that quality here. But we're not trying to be Champagne. We're being Oregon. And Method Oregon is a concept just like Cap Classique, just like Champagne. It's a standard that says there is a quality that we really need to start seeing that differentiates some of the categories within the sparkling wine category so that consumers can understand. So it's really an education component. And we tried to do this a few years ago. We had this really great group called Celebrate Sparkling. And the curve on that was there were so many people involved, we just couldn't make any decisions. Everybody wanted their wines to participate. And so we started getting together, and it was, I would say, Dan Diphouse, Gene Feldkamp, Andrew, Kate Payne Brown, Roland Stoles, Jim Verneau. We sat in a room, had phone conversations, and said, it's time, and to try to capitalize on a lot of the excitement that was going on with sparkling wine here in Oregon. And so Method Oregon, we decided to put the flag in the ground when we heard that IPNC was going to take a year off. And that weekend of July 26th was an opportunity where now there was a vacancy. And we knew that sparkling wine had its opportunity. And we put a flag in the ground. I called Jim Verneau. It was fantastic. I said, hey, bud, Domaine Willamette is an absolutely stunning showcase sparkling wine facility in Dundee. And I said, thanks for making it too big for how much wine you make in that facility. He goes, thanks, I think. What do you want? And I said, I think we need to do an event. And we need to do an event that really showcases Method Oregon and what it can be. And he said, I agree. And he generously donated the facility. So we have the Method Oregon event on July 26th this year at Domaine Willamette. Concept really being is that this is, I agree with Andrew when he says it's not a movement. People love bubbles. They always have. Mm-hmm. But there is a movement in the sense of Method Oregon and the fact that the quality here is really spectacular. And people are now, thanks to Radiant and Vinovate, being able to make high-end, beautiful, traditional method sparkling wine at a super high level. And this is going to showcase that. And what's great about it is that we'll then showcase the Willamette Valley and Oregon in what we can do for sparkling wine, but even more so, we'll go into harvest immediately after that. And then immediately after we're done with harvest, that's when we go to work. And that's when Method Oregon gets organized. And we, put a group together, we create a board, we create an organization. If you go back to Cap Classique, now there's a logo that you can put on the back of your label that says Cap Classique. And if you're part of Cap Classique, it means you have a standard in which you make your sparkling wine that is at a level that is qualified to be Cap Classique. That's what Method Oregon's going to do. We see a time and a place where you look at a wine menu where, yes, sparkling wine from Oregon, but then there's a separate section that says Method Oregon, which is really the differentiator, where you really know that the quality that's really there. And I think we're getting to that stage, and we need to be at that stage. And it's no, disrespect to any of the other folks that are making something that isn't Method Oregon, because there's a time and a place for carbon fused, time and a place for pet nat, time and a place for non-vintage, and not necessarily to a standard. But from a quality aspect, Method Oregon needs to happen. The timing's now.
Like it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Nice
That
tirade.
was, yeah. That was like your own,
I just woke up. What
soliloquy
happened?
kind of, Shakespearean Andy Lytle. Wow.
That's as serious as it's ever going to get.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
You need an ice cube?
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I do put ice in my Chardonnay and in my bubbles if they're warm. I'm a firm believer that champagne and Chardonnay should always be served colder than people think, because if you like it cold, you're going to love it. But if you want it a little warmer, just wait 5 minutes.
You can edit that out.
No, I think that needs to be in there because we have the same conversation with Eugenia with her handful of ice in her jelly jar. So,
That's right.
but I think that's, that's what kind of the podcast was originally started, was to bring the misconception of wine being fancy only down to an enjoyment level that can be for anybody, with any food, with any atmosphere, with any event. You can eat and drink it with pizza and it's okay.
It's great.
Mine is popcorn. Like I love Pinot and popcorn with a little truffle salt on top.
Blanc de Blanc and popcorn.
Goes
Yes.
with anything.
Yes.
You know, there's a misnomer, I think, and I don't know why it's this, champagne or sparkling wine has always been known to be something that you have for celebrations.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, and thanks to Andrew and the quality that he makes, but, we've been doing dinners and whatnot where we serve, Lytle-Barnett for the first course and the last course, all the way through dessert. And people are starting to understand now that the way that it's being made and the quality that's there, that you can have sparkling wine throughout an entire meal. And it doesn't have to be for a wedding or a graduation or just a special event. You can have it every single day.
Tuesday.
You can have any day that ends in Y.
And with fried chicken.
And fried chicken is incredible.
Yes.
But how about, if I just said the word eggs benedict to you for brunch, what do you want to drink with that? You want sparkling wine. You want that acid to go through that, the sauce, the eggs, all of those things. It is a wine that can be drank with any meal, every day, anytime. And I think that people are starting to realize that.
Yeah, I think that's been a huge misnomer is that you have to drink it with that fancy,
Correct.
pop the cork, blow it up, whatever the case is. And, it has to be for the Super Bowl. When you win it, not when you're at home, celebrating or whatever. It's, you got to win it to pop it, But yeah, no, I think it's amazing. Like I've, learned so much, obviously, from everybody that I've talked to and I've interviewed over the last 8 years. But champagne has been one of those mysteries for me that wasn't hard for me to wrap my head around because I understood it and I loved it. But I didn't get it, when I first, started understanding wine is that Champagne was a region, and you couldn't call it champagne here. And I didn't understand, is it not good quality? And that's why we call it sparkling wine, because it just isn't like the fancy to be able to call it champagne. But then when I was over in Spain and we had cava, so like now experiencing all these things, now I get it. It's, it's a regional thing.
Yeah. I mean, Prosecco is a category.
Yeah.
Right? We don't make Prosecco here, right? We don't make that kind of high sugar here. But, man, it's a category, and it's massive.
Oh, my sister
right?
loves it.
So, I would never say, Lytle-Barnett is going to make a Prosecco. But there's a time and a place for that. There's a time and a place for a carbon-fused. There's a time and a place for a pet nat. Maybe not from Andrew's.
You know what? And Andrew's probably going to go.
We may not make one.
But there's a winery in Maui that makes sparkling pineapple wine. It sounds sweet and it sounds awful. It's dry. It's amazing. Like Method Champenois. I mean, it's unique, and it's actually one of my favorite. We order a case every year just because it's great for everything.
I think I spoke to that winemaker once.
Yeah.
He had questions for me.
Yeah. Both of both of his boys went to Linfield here.
Okay.
Yeah. So Joe and Henry. Yeah.
Joe and Henry.
Joe and Henry.
They're very Midwest, but they live in Hawaii.
They live in Maui.
Do they have a side job? Are they selling marijuana?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, no, actually,
Coffee?
last time I was in Maui, I met Joe up at the vineyard, and they gave me this tour of the vineyard and the facility. It was amazing. Yeah,
love it.
Really great family. So
Pineapples hanging off of vines?
they do 10 million pounds of pineapple a year. Whoa. Yeah. I think if that number is right.
I used to weigh 10 million pounds.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah. What else should we know about what's going on with the Method Oregon event or anything else about sparkling? Or what should we know about Andrew Davis that you have not already spilled?
Well, here's what I would say is that to kind of cover off the event, what's cool is there's 2 tickets you can buy. You can buy a VIP ticket for $250. And what's cool about that is when you come in, there is actually a panel. And on that panel is going to be Roland Stolz, is going to be Andrew Davis, and going to be Kate Payne Brown. And what's fantastic about that is that, we don't like to call it past, present, and future, but the reality is, Kate now just became the maker at Argyle, right? Roland started Argyle. Andrew was the maker for sparkling wine at Argyle, and now Kate's there. And, it's a fantastic picture of what's gone on with sparkling and the evolution of it. So, with a VIP ticket, you get to see that panel at the beginning, and then we'll do a kind of a tasting, amongst the 22 producers that we're going to have at the Method Oregon event, and then we'll have a lunch all together, and we'll interact with all the people and whatnot, and then we're going to have a grand tasting, and the grand tasting is going to be from, I think, 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock. All of it's at Domaine Willamette, and the grand tasting ticket's $150. And it's 22 producers from around the state of Oregon that, really kind of meet the kind of quote, what we call standards. And those standards really are, it's made in the traditional method. It's got at least 4 atmospheres of pressure in the bottle, so pressure in the bottle, aged at least 15 months. And it's got to be made in Oregon, produced in Oregon. You got to make at least 2 SKUs and make at least 500 cases. We really want to be able to push sparkling wine outside the state, and that's super important, as it relates to education and kind of getting that out there. So that's the event, and that's what's happening. So he probably wouldn't say that he is on the panel, but he was an integral part. Right, because just as Radiant Sparkling Company has been an integral part of why are we here? How have we elevated sparkling wine at the highest level?
Mm-hmm.
You getting this?
Does he have a propane tank and a flamethrower?
No.
Here, refresh your glass.
Yep.
There's cold bubbles.
Yeah, we need some cold bubbles.
Well, I don't know how cold they are anymore, and the sleeve should have, done its trick, but not as cold as I would have wanted them. Oh, but they look good. Oh, yeah. Look at the color.
Good.
Hold that up to the light. Oh, baby. That's
look at all those pretty
fantastic.
bubbles on top. Nice handling, Mel.
Is that a sexy color?
It is a very sexy
Well,
color.
against the light, super sexy.
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer that our bubbles should be really, 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 really pale pink.
This is the one that you said you were upset about because it's too dark.
Yep.
Pretty, Andy.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
We make a Saignée now, and the Saignée is right in between the Brut and the Brut Rosé, and so the Saignée is more of a copper, and this is our pink, and then we have a copper, and then we have our Brut. So, and we
It's
make
less about color. It's about the style.
it's about the style.
And the style just carries through to happen to be a lighter color.
But here's a kind of funny story about, Andrew and I have really kind of always toyed with this, but dosage, right? And how much dosage we keep in our wines. And it's always been very low. So if you think Nature is 0 to 3 grams of sugar, Extra Brut is 0 to 6 grams, and then Brut is 0 to 12 grams. And what's crazy about that is the most grams of sugar we've ever put in any wine we've made in the last 12 vintages is this one, which is our 2018 Brut Rosé, and it's 7 grams. So it's just getting outside of Extra Brut. Beyond that, every other wine we've made is either Nature or it's Extra Brut. But we've never put that on the label because the consumer really doesn't understand it at that complexity, right? So we call it Brut, or we call it Brut Rosé, our Blanc de Blanc, and our Blanc de Noir. We do have a great story that our 2020 Pinot Meunier that we're releasing here later this year. We really couldn't put Pinot Meunier on the label because it had to say Pinot Meunier of sparkling wine. And
Mouthful.
we're trying to get out from the umbrella of sparkling wine, right? With Method Oregon and everything that we've talked about. So, we started talking about what could the other name be, and Andrew and I were just kind of running ideas, and we came up with this name, Le Mélangeur. And Le Mélangeur means the blender. And Pinot Meunier, traditionally, for still wine and for sparkling wine, has always been the blender and not necessarily a standalone grape. So we named it Le Mélangeur, and it's fantastic. And has a Tiffany blue label. We just got it the other day, and it's gorgeous. And here's the other thing that's super fantastic is that I know. Give me a moment. I'll tell you that.
There'll be another super fantastic here in a minute.
But what's crazy is that because we've been making wine so long, we're releasing this year our 2014 Brut, which is our 10-year extended tirage. And we're super excited about it. We've never released any wine and called it extended tirage, ever. And we were waiting for the 10-year. And it's completely different. It's a painting. I got it's a gift from some friends. We have all the rights to the painting, and the label is stunning, and it's dramatically different. So if you think Dom Perignon and how beautiful it is, and I think Lytle-Barnett is a very traditional, people who confuse it with French champagne because it looks French and it has family names on it. And it's always the same, except the label or the necker changes, the color. That's it. Other than that, the label always stays the same, just like Dom Perignon. But when Dom Perignon has their artist series, it's flashes of color and totally different and changes dramatically. And we've done that with our 10-year extended tirage, and we've just seen that label, and it's fantastic. And so we're going to release that at a dinner that we're going to do at the Windfall Vineyard on July 19th with Tournant at the vineyard. And if anybody wants to go to that, 50 tickets only, $250 at the top of the Windfall Vineyard, where we're going to build our tasting room. So it's a showcase, kind of outstanding in the field type of a look. Fantastic. How was that for a plug?
That was a great plug. It makes me want to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I wasn't invited, so.
I've always invited you.
Yeah.
If you'd stop blocking me on social media and emails.
You gotta, block your stalkers. Yeah. Okay.
I think you made a really good point, though, and you kind of walked around it, but we're just now getting to the point in the Oregon industry where we're beginning to showcase some of these older wines, a decade in the bottle. Yes, Argyle did it, but now it's that second wave of producers that's come on that's doubled the production of sparkling in the state. They're now getting to that maturity level where they can start to showcase these really terrific older wines.
RMS just did it with their 2013. Can't remember. What was the points they got? 100.
No. Number one in the world.
Number one in the world. Right? RMS. Rollins Stoles.
Okay, that's where I thought you were going, but I just sometimes you have to speak English to me, and spell things out.
I'm a hieroglyph.
There we go.
I'm a hieroglyph guy, but
yeah.
So there's a great example, right? The RMS, 2013 Brut got 100 points, number one in the world, enthusiast or somebody I can't remember. But what an accolade that is, and what a thing to say. And that's kind of why, with the Method Oregon thing, we're like, now's the time. We're making wines, and we have been making wines. Again, thanks to Andrew and Vinovate and these companies, we're making wines that are world-class wines right here in Oregon, and, sparkling wine, traditional method, vintage dated, just awesome wines.
And I think, I have friends that are, throughout the United States, throughout the world or whatever, and, they hear me talking about Oregon wine, and Oregon is still this little podunk spot on the map. And there is starting to be coming out all of these, awards, these accolades, these places to visit, go here, blah, blah, blah. But I don't think people really understand because they see Napa. Like if they're going to go U.S., Napa's the place to go because it's the standout, and it's whatever. But I don't think people give Oregon the credit that it deserves for the world-class wine that is being produced here, because they just, until they get here and until they experience it, until they have something like this, or some of these beautiful, amazing Pinots, and it's not just about Pinot and Chardonnay here anymore. You're also getting some of these other varietals that are really making a stand.
Yeah.
If you've not been to Oregon, people, you need to book your trip.
Yeah.
I look at Monique over here, my assistant / niece who's 21. I've ruined her because she has started drinking stuff like this and not the barefoot wines and the Boone's Farm and, the things that I, tried to drink, because that Mad Dog 2020, that was, I guess.
Great wine.
It's great wine.
It is. And Night Train. that's also great wine
a little bit
as well.
too fortified wine. In there.
Fortified wines have a time and a place.
Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah. But it is such a spectacular, special place here. And you have people like Andrew, you have people like Roland, you have people like Andy Lionel, that are that are here that are making these amazing wines and are there to pour them for you, to educate you about what it is.
Yeah.
And you get the experience.
Well, there's another cool thing too. Vine Pair just, came out with Oregon and the Willamette Valley is the #1 wine region tourist destination in the world this year. And how fantastic is that? So going back to your point, people would go to Tuscany or they would go to Napa or Sonoma or these places because they're so familiar with them. The fact that somebody would have the audacity to come out and say, come to the Willamette Valley, this is world-class wine. The words are getting out there, right? And people are starting to hear it. And just like, I love to go to New York City, but I don't go to New York City every year. And so people are trying to go in different places. And we're creating this opportunity where we have showcase amazing, beautiful facilities. We have amazing wines. We have fantastic winemakers. And the people who are coming here are talking about it. And you're starting to see that show up in Miami and New York and Chicago and Dallas and LA, and they're talking about what's happening here. Not just Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, but sparkling wine. And, there's a lot of chatter about Sauvignon Blanc and what it could do here. It's fantastic, right? It's a rising tide raises all the boats.
It's pretty fun. It's fun to be part of.
It's fun to be part of, and we're small. So there's still surprises. I think if you go to Napa Sonoma, you kind of know what you're getting into. If you come to Oregon, a lot of people come here with a blank slate. They don't know what they're going to be getting, and they get many pleasant surprises along the way.
And mushrooms.
And mushrooms.
Because we need those, yes. Yeah.
Well,
I guess it all depends on the mushrooms.
it does rain here a lot.
Yeah, it does rain here a lot. Noticed a whole bunch of them in my yard this morning.
That's
so,
weird.
there we go. Yeah.
Which, quite frankly, we've had an amazing, talk about the 2025 vintage. We've had, oh my God, we're off to gangbusters.
Oh, yeah.
Starts like a rocket
It's
ship
been an
to the moon.
amazing spring.
Now, here's what I say, and this is where the world's changed dramatically because I've, at the end of the day, I'm a farmer, which is very hard for me to say, and I don't even think I could look in the mirror and say that with a straight face. But it's been, April was too dry, right? And May's been great. And, we need some rain. And we're going to get it, right? We still have a rainy season that's still coming, and we'll get it in, kind of.
It's not July 4th yet.
That's correct,
yes.
Right? And so we'll get some. But, there's a period of time here that on a consistent basis, and this goes back to Chardonnay, from a climate perspective, we're warming up significantly. And I'm biased, right? We have 2 vineyards down in the Willamette Hills, and we have the Van Duzer corridor, right? So optimum, grape growing conditions are hot days and cold nights, right, where you can shut them down. Well, Van Duzer allows that cold air and that ocean air to come in every single night, via fog or via wind, and come in and shut the vines down. Gives us longer hang time, more complexities in the skins, all of these great things. For Andrew and I, it's absolutely epic conditions to make sparkling wine. Absolutely epic. So, and it's also great for, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. So, people are starting to see that it, it's warming up, right? I mean, it's, even the wines up in Yamhill Carlton are absolutely fantastic. And stylistically, if you're down in Eola Amity, they're different wines, even Chardonnay Pinot. And that's thickness of the skin, and that's, the hot days, cold nights, versus they're not getting the Van Duzer, impact. And so that's the beauty of it, right? You're starting to see now with these sub-AVAs around Oregon, all of these amazing different styles of even Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. If you just stayed on those 2 varietals, you can really see a difference based on the AVA that you're in. And that's awesome, right? That's not a negative in any way, shape, or form. That creates all kinds of opportunities.
I think it's fun for like somebody who's tasting to hit the AVAs, and you can taste and feel the difference of each of those different spots because of that. I live in the Eola Hills too, and 2:30, 3 o'clock every day, those ocean winds kick up, and we're not as far from the beach as people think.
40 miles.
Yep, it's a quick little airplane flight over the mountains, and
not all of
You
us
fly?
have planes.
my husband pretends to.
Yeah. Oh my God! Nobody should pretend to fly.
Pretend to fly.
He doesn't have he doesn't have his license yet. He's working on that still. He's flies, kind of a busy guy.
He flies, but he doesn't have his license.
Yeah.
And he's only pretending.
Yeah, he's just pretending. Yeah. It's a good thing he doesn't listen to this because he'd be pissed. Okay, gentlemen. Anything else that we should know about sparkling that we haven't talked about? Modern Oregon that we haven't talked about before I say goodbye and say thank you. Wow, really?
I'm looking
quiet from the couch.
Quite frankly, he's my friend, and we've been making wine together now 13 years. He's the best sparkling winemaker in Oregon and probably in the world, and he's humble about it. And I'm just going to throw it out one last time. I'm going to throw this out. He just sold Radiant Sparkling Company to Rob Townsend and Vinovate and that crew. And I think it's the greatest thing that's happened in the Willamette Valley because it's not a negative in any way, shape, or form. Andrew's still involved. But what it shows is that people are investing into sparkling wine at a very high level here in Oregon. And to me, nothing screams quality and a bright future than somebody investing at that kind of level into the Willamette Valley, into Oregon for sparkling wine. And, it could not have happened without Andrew back in 2012, 2013, starting Radiant. We wouldn't be here having this conversation. And I think we'd be remiss not giving him that kind of appreciation because he won't say it for himself.
Yeah, somebody had to do it.
You mean I had to say it or you had to start it?
Somebody had to start it. There was a second wave that wanted to be there.
Yeah, but you did it.
Yes, and there's going to be a third wave beyond this. There is the next step. This is the kick on the soccer ball that got it down the field. There's still to get it in the goal at the end. This was just the beginning of the game. We've got years and years and years ahead of us.
I believe that. I also believe that if it doesn't scare the shit out of you, it isn't worth doing.
Agreed.
And that was a massive step he made, starting Radiant. And if he wouldn't have had the couillons to do that, wouldn't have happened.
I got a lot of support.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, good on you. Does that mean you have a little bit more time now?
Ask me again in a month.
Okay. Okay, that's
I'll
fair.
send you a postcard.
That's fair. Are you going somewhere great?
I don't know yet. I haven't figured it out.
Hey, wait a minute. He still makes wine for Lytle-Barnett.
Yeah, but you're just small potatoes.
Whoa!
Just kidding.
That's funny. You're the second largest producer in the state next to Argyle.
How about that? How did that happen? And we make vintage only.
Yeah.
That was the sympathy vote I didn't put in this. Can I get that into this podcast?
Sure.
When we first started making wine, we
Stop recording,
we made wine in 2013, 2014, 2015, 2016, 2017,
That's about when I started seeing him.
Mm.
And
you didn't show up before.
Well, I had a job. I had a job still. But the reality is we made wine for 6 years before we sold one bottle. Mm. I mean, I understand why people don't make vintage-only sparkling wine here in Oregon. But the beauty is, from 2019 forward, there's a vintage that follows every year into perpetuity. That's a leap of faith. That's believing in something when maybe others hadn't. And it's also believing in the guy that's making the wine, that what he's making is world-class.
Well, as much kudos as you gave him for taking a leap of faith, you equally deserve a ballsy move for making 6 vintages without selling a bottle. I mean, that's also brave. And it's also maybe borderline crazy to an extent. And there's a lot of money out of your pocket. So, give yourself some credit.
There's a cliche there.
Yeah, well, whatever. Yeah. Whatever. Well, remind us the event and how to buy tickets.
July 26th at Domain Willamette, methodoregon.com is where you can buy tickets. $250 for a VIP ticket, which is 10 a.m. until 1. And then the grand tasting ticket is from 2 p.m. till 5 p.m. at Domain Willamette, $150. It's going to be fantastic. We only have room for about 300 people, so get your tickets while you can.
You said 22 producers?
22 producers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that are all making wine, super high quality wine here in Oregon.
There you go, people. That'll give you something to do for July.
Root for
IPNC, not on the calendar this year. Modern Oregon is your placeholder.
Method Oregon.
What did I say?
Modern.
Method, modern.
She's hammered.
I've been drinking wine for 4 hours at this point in time. So, Method Oregon. I've been struggling with that for a couple of days. I've been actually stressing out about saying the wrong thing, and there I did. I did it at the end.
You waited till the very end.
I did.
I know, but
yes.
Remember, we're second fiddle. We're the second group today, so
Yeah.
you've been working hard.
Save the best for last, right?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, Andrew, and then I got to come with him. That's good.
There you go. Well, thank you both for joining us.
Thanks for having
Thank you, Andrew, for joining us for the very first time. Andy, I'm sure
Pleasure.
you'll be back for something. We'll come up with another reason. I do need a co-host every once in a while, so there's always that.
I'm in.
I know. You're a hell of a sidekick. Yeah. It's kind of like the Muppets, like the old men sitting in the balcony.
Oh my
like,
God, that's my dad and my brother.
Yeah.
The old man that sit there, that's my dad and my brother. Exactly.
Yeah.
100%.
That could be you and I. Yeah.
I never thought of you as a Muppet.
Yeah. I don't know which one I would identify with, but we could work on that.
Swedish chef.
Swedish chef.
I don't want to be Beaker. Okay, well, thank you both so very much. I appreciate you more than you know. I know you came from Seattle, and poor Andrew had to sit downtown for 2 hours because he didn't get the instructions from his partner about what time he was supposed to be
I got
here.
them from you.
Yeah. Nope, you got him from him.
But it was your document.
They were coming from
I
him.
just give him enough information just to be dangerous.
Yeah, okay. Well, there we go. I'm still blaming it on Andy. Yeah. Big thank you to John, my audio guy extraordinaire, and Monique, of course, with her cute little slippers on. I see that she's got her office slippers on over there in the corner. Dustin fed us before you guys got here from Biscuit and Pickles.
Fantastic
Yeah,
food.
fantastic food. What did we have? Veggie lasagna today, this epic salad, his chocolate chip cookies with
How
salt
did you know
on them.
Andrew was a pescatarian?
I did not.
I
Yes,
mean,
and-
fantastic. Now
yeah.
that he knows that, he's going to go take some.
Yeah, it's so good. So, anyhow, thank you to everybody. Make sure that you attend Method Oregon. I got that
done.
right this time.
Nailed it. July 26th.
Yes, and share this with all your friends. If you love wine, are interested in wine, want to get into wine, Wine Crush Podcast is a great way for you to learn new producers, learn new fun facts that may or may not be relevant, and just have a
true.
good time, or true. So, thank you, everybody. Peace out.